I'm Jesus, but most people call me AJ.
His name is David Berg, and the movement is the Children of God.
Ruth, how old were you when you got married?
16.
16 years old. How old were you when you became pregnant with your first child?
16.
21 women and 18 men had committed suicide to follow the teachings of their leader.
His theology is a mix of Christianity, Confucianism, shamanism, and anti-communist rage.
And millions of dollars were transferred into his bank accounts in Switzerland and Liechtenstein.
My thought was, where is everyone? And I could see places on the building where there was no flames, no smoke. I kept hearing that's where they were.
The man who'd spent more than half his life in jail would begin preaching an Armageddon gospel he called Helter Skelter.
When they arrived, Jones told them all to drink the Flavor Aid mixture.
These are 10 of the most disturbing Christian cult leaders, progressing to ones that get more and more infamous and evil. Alan John Miller is an Australian spiritual leader and founder of the movement called Divine Truth. He claims to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and teaches a blend of Christian theology, emotional healing, and personal development.
Alan John Miller, or AJ as he likes to be known, believes he is Jesus and he's deadly serious.
The Roman soldiers weren't certain as to whether I'd died or not yet, and so they actually speared the side of my body up into the heart. I'm Jesus, but most people call me AJ or Alan John Miller.
I'm claiming to be Jesus, that's true.
How does it feel, though, Jesus talking to us today and everybody watching at home and knowing that 99.9% of that audience are mocking you, are laughing at you, are saying, this man is bonkers and she must be as bad as him?
Miller lives in Queensland with his partner Mary Luck, who claims to be the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene.
With his partner, Mary Luck, who also believes she is reincarnated.
Oh my God, this is true. Like, this guy is Jesus and I remember it. And actually, I remember who I am. Like, I understand who I am now.
The movement focuses on establishing a personal relationship with God and releasing emotional blockages to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Miller's followers are encouraged to confront their personal traumas and fears, which he believes are necessary steps for salvation and preparation for a global transformation.
Well, most of these diseases, again, are naturally occurring diseases which our body should be able to fight against as long as our body is in complete harmony with love, as long as we don't have emotions within us that have been usually imposed upon us by our environment that are out of harmony with love. Our body will be able to fight any of these diseases.
Critics have labeled Divine Truth a cult, citing concerns about Miller's control over his followers, financial dependency, and his extraordinary claims of divinity. Despite this, Miller continues to attract international attention, drawing small but devoted groups to his seminars and teachings. David Berg, also known as Moses David, was the founder of the Children of God, later renamed the Family International.
His name is David Berg, and the movement is the Children of God. At first sight, they seem much like the other Jesus freaks of the era, but David Berg is driven by dark impulses that will poison the lives of many.
He established the group in the late 1960s during the countercultural movement, drawing in young followers with messages of love, faith, and communal living. Over time, Berg's teachings became increasingly controversial and deviant. He introduced the practice of flirty fishing, which encouraged members to use sexual relationships to recruit new followers and garner financial support.
Then there was also something called the FFing revolution, which was flirty fishing. They would send women into hotels or bars to go and chat up the rich people that were there on work under the pretext of speaking to them about Jesus, but really they were just being hookers. They would get a lot of money from these men as well.
Berg also preached apocalyptic beliefs, claiming the end times were imminent and urging his followers to prepare for divine judgment. Under his leadership, allegations of child sexual abuse, exploitation, and psychological manipulation within the group emerged, leading to legal and public condemnation.
Only has one law, the law of love.
One of Berg's great revelations was the law of love, which basically became his excuse for doing whatever he wanted to. As long as it was done with love, then, it couldn't be wrong. There's no way it can be wrong. So, that's basically the way he would excuse, having sex with children or being polygamous, having sex with whoever within the communes.
After Berg's death in 1994, the group renounced its most controversial practices, but remains stained by its abusive history. Warren Jeffs is a convicted criminal and former leader of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS, a polygamous sect that split from mainstream Mormonism.
A polygamous society where arranged marriages and sexual abuse of minors is commonplace.
Ruth, how old were you when you got married?
16.
16 years old. How old were you when you became pregnant with your first child?
16.
Jeffs inherited his position as the prophet of the FLDS after his father's death, gaining absolute control over his followers. He dictated all aspects of their lives, including whom they could marry, where they could live, and how they should worship.
With unconditional obedience to a leader that they believed to be a prophet.
According to religion, the only one who could really communicate directly with God. So the orders that you were receiving were coming from God.
A cold-blooded leader who rules with true dictatorial power, controlling every aspect of the lives of those who believe in him.
Jeffs arranged numerous underage marriages, calling them spiritual unions, which eventually led to his arrest in 2006. In 2011, he was convicted of child sexual assault related to these practices and sentenced to life in prison.
He's a pedophile. He is probably a psychopath. Certainly he has no sympathy or empathy in any meaningful way for all the victims that he has terrorized and done harm to.
Despite his incarceration, many FLDS members continued to regard Jeffs as their spiritual leader, receiving his guidance through smuggled messages. His actions brought increased scrutiny to the FLDS and highlighted the dangers of unchecked religious authority. Marshall Applewhite was the co-founder and leader of Heaven's Gate, a cult that combined Christian apocalyptic beliefs with UFO theories.
She recalled how her usually level-headed co-star had suddenly started to act strangely, talking about UFOs and preaching this strange religion. That's right, Bo and Peep had created their own new religious movement, or cult, depending on the point of view.
Applewhite, who had a background in music and education, experienced a series of personal and spiritual crises that led him to believe he was chosen for a divine mission. Alongside his partner Bonnie Nettles, he taught that followers needed to transcend their earthly bodies to reach a higher level of existence. This journey, he claimed, would be facilitated by extraterrestrial beings. After Nettles' death in 1985, Applewhite intensified his teachings, culminating in the belief that a spaceship following the Hale-Bopp comet would carry their souls to salvation.
Probably it was the appearance of the comet Hale-Bopp. Heaven's Gate saw this as a sign, a portent. Applewhite spread the idea that another celestial object, a spacecraft, was following in its wake. This was the signal that the members were ready to leave their bodies and board the spacecraft, where T was waiting for a crew of higher beings.
Applewhite and 38 followers committed mass suicide in a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, to, quote, shed their earthly vehicles.
On the 26th of that month, local police broke into their communal residence, Rancho Santa Fe, San Diego. They found 39 bodies, 21 women, and 18 men who had willingly come to end their journey on planet Earth. 21 women and 18 men had committed suicide to follow the teachings of their leader, Marshall Hearth Applewhite.
The event shocked the world and remains one of the most infamous examples of cult-related tragedy. Sun Myung Moon was a South Korean religious leader and the founder of the Unification Church established in the 1950s. Moon claimed to have received a divine revelation that he was the Messiah chosen to complete Jesus Christ's mission of creating a sinless world.
During the Korean War, Moon escapes to South Korea and establishes his Unification Church in 1954. His theology is a mix of Christianity, Confucianism, shamanism, and anti-communist rage.
The Unification Church gained prominence for its mass weddings, in which thousands of couples, often from different countries and cultures, were matched and married by Moon himself.
It's a joyous day at RFK Stadium. Over 28,000 couples are about to be married at the same time. Presiding over the ceremony is the Korean minister, the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. These are arranged marriages for these couples. They are all members of the Unification Church, and the matches have been handpicked by Reverend Moon himself.
Moon also established a vast business empire, including media outlets, universities, and real estate ventures, which provided significant financial support to his movement. Critics accused Moon of exploiting his followers financially, using authoritarian methods and promoting himself as a divine figure.
Followers of Sun Myung Moon generate millions of dollars for his Unification Church. They are willing to give up their lives and loved ones for their true parents, Reverend Moon and his wife. Any doubts are overcome by the powerful mind control techniques.
Despite controversies, the Unification Church attracted millions of followers worldwide and left a lasting impact on global religious and political landscapes.
In 1982, in an effort to connect himself to American conservative politicians, Moon founds the Washington Times. The newspaper's ideological focus allows him to befriend Republican ex-presidents Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush, all of whom later attend and speak at church events.
Moon passed away in 2012, but his teachings and organization continue to influence followers. Joseph Smith was the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormonism.
So Joseph Smith is in this grove, and he's praying. And after a run-in with the devil, he sees a pillar of light, brighter than the sun, directly over his head. And within that light, he sees two people whose brightness defy all description. And he finds out that it's God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus goes on to tell him that none of the churches that he's been investigating are true, and that instead, Joseph is being called to do the work of God, to restore the real true church that had been lost from the earth.
Born in 1805 in Vermont, Smith claimed to have experienced visions of God and Jesus Christ, who instructed him to restore the true church on earth. In 1827, he said he discovered golden plates inscribed with divine writings, which he translated into the Book of Mormon. The text became the foundation of Mormon theology.
But yeah, the point is that the Book of Mormon is a history of these Jews turned indigenous Americans. And unsurprisingly, there's a whole community of believers who work to validate that this is actually a historic record. But no, in reality, there's no archaeological, genetic, or linguistic evidence that supports the Book of Mormon's assertion that Jewish people migrated to the Americas around 600 BC.
Smith's leadership attracted a growing number of followers, but his teachings, including the practice of polygamy, sparked intense opposition.
And it's in Nauvoo where Joseph says that an angel appeared to him and demanded multiple times, against his will, that he take on multiple wives, that those wives are sealed to him. His first plural marriage is to a teenager, and he goes on to have 40 wives in just 3 years. Many of them were married to other people, but then were sealed to Joseph, the prophet. What I find striking here is that up until this point, you have this meticulous documentation of every single revelation and theology rule and new policy in the church here in what's called the Doctrine and Covenants. But polygamy stayed quiet and private. It was one of those revelations reserved for just Joseph and the leaders that he chose.
He faced multiple arrests and was frequently driven out of communities. In 1844, Smith was jailed in Carthage, Illinois, where a mob attacked the jail and killed him. Despite his controversial life and death, Smith's teachings established a religious movement that has grown into a global faith with millions of adherents. L. Ron Hubbard was the founder of Scientology, a religious movement that blends self-help principles with spiritual beliefs.
Hubbard was quick to correct anyone that Dianetics was not the same as psychology and should not even be equated with such. This was truly the first concrete example of Hubbard's animosity and antagonism towards professional mental health treatment. Why listen to a trained professional when you could take snake oil in the privacy of your own home and pretend to be well?
Originally a prolific science fiction writer, Hubbard published Dianetics in 1950, presenting it as a revolutionary mental health methodology. When Dianetics faced criticism from the scientific community, Hubbard rebranded it as a religious philosophy and founded the Church of Scientology in 1954.
Dianetics itself reads like a patchwork of other popular psychoanalytic theories, repackaged and repurposed specifically for the layperson. with a good deal borrowed directly from Sigmund Freud's abreaction therapy and Alfred Korzybski's general semantics, as well as techniques on hypnosis, one might wonder what about the content was original at all.
Hubbard taught that individuals are immortal spiritual beings, or thetans, trapped by negative experiences. Scientology practices, such as auditing, aim to help adherents achieve spiritual freedom.
And auditing, aka Hubbard's patented form of self-counseling, meant that rather than pay a professional therapist for months or years of treatment for what may turn out to be an inconclusive diagnosis, all a faithful Dianetics practitioner needed was a copy of the book and a friend to co-audit with. The process of auditing was laid out expressly in the text in order to tame what Hubbard called the emotional or reactive mind.
Hubbard amassed a fortune from the organization, but faced accusations of financial exploitation, manipulation, and abusive practices.
He received daily telex communications that kept him apprised of the activities and income of Scientology organizations all around the world, and that the church sent Hubbard $15,000 a week, over $116,000 in 2020 money, and millions of dollars were transferred into his bank accounts in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. All the while, Hubbard continued to seek out, quote, a safe haven in a friendly little country where Scientology would be allowed to prosper.
He spent the later years of his life in seclusion, evading legal challenges, and died in 1986. David Koresh, born Vernon Wayne Howell, was the leader of the Branch Davidians, a sect that split from the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Now, the so-called Army of Babylon prepares to break the stalemate and, according to Koresh, is about to set off an apocalyptic prophecy. A prophecy that David Koresh has been preaching for the last 8 years as the leader of the Branch Davidian cult. The Davidians' whole belief system centers on the literal interpretation of the Book of Revelation, and no one could interpret the Word of God quite like Koresh.
Koresh claimed to be the final prophet and focused his teachings on the apocalyptic messages in the Bible's Book of Revelation. He moved the group to a compound near Waco, Texas, called Mount Carmel, where they prepared for an impending confrontation with government forces, which Koresh believed was prophesied. In 1993, federal agents attempted to execute a search warrant on the compound, leading to a 51-day standoff.
I remember hearing a sound of breaking glass and the popping sounds all over, like around the building, and you'd hear the gas spray somewhere.
But gas masks are not made for children. They will be the most vulnerable during the attack.
We banked on the fact that the parents, through a natural parental instinct, once that tear gas started to be inserted into that location, would move heaven and earth to get their kids out of there. I would, but we were wrong.
The siege ended in a catastrophic fire, which killed Koresh and 76 of his followers, including children.
A few minutes later, I heard a call from upstairs saying the building's on fire.
There is no doubt in my mind that the Branch Davidians struck the individual matches that set that compound on fire.
With Mount Carmel in flames, Koresh and the Davidians either have to flee or be burned alive.
My thought was, where is everyone? And I could see places on the building where there was no flames, no smoke. I kept hearing that's where they were.
The event became a defining moment in discussions of religious extremism, law enforcement tactics, and the consequences of charismatic leadership. Charles Manson was the leader of the Manson family, a cult that operated in California during the late 1960s.
Incarcerated again in 1960 and facing a lengthy sentence, Manson began to study new ways of thinking.
There was a Scientologist. Manson picked up on this, and he did 150 hours of auditing, which is the Scientology term for counseling. He started imbuing these songs with much of the philosophies that he was picking up from Scientology and also from his observations of human nature. So
Manson claimed to be a messianic figure and manipulated his followers into believing that a race war, which he called Helter Skelter, was imminent.
The man who'd spent more than half his life in jail would begin preaching an Armageddon gospel he called Helter Skelter.
And, you know, he made it seem like something very pretty.
Helter Skelter came out of one of the Beatles songs, the words, but what it came to mean to Manson and what he was preaching, so to speak, was a race war.
Drawing on a mix of Christian imagery, the Beatles' lyrics, and his own apocalyptic visions, he convinced his followers to commit a series of brutal murders to spark the conflict. In 1969, members of the Manson family murdered actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home, as well as Leno and Rosemary LaBianca the following night.
Those eventually chosen to die were 44-year-old supermarket executive Leno LaBianca and his 38-year-old wife, Rosemary.
So he said, "You wait here, I'll go into the house." He went in and tied them both up, then went back out, told them, "It's okay now, you can go in and kill them." And then he drove off.
The LaBiancas were trussed up literally like a couple of hogs at slaughter, and then they were slaughtered.
Manson was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and spent the rest of his life in prison. His actions and ideology have made him an enduring symbol of cult manipulation and violence. Jim Jones was the founder of the People's Temple, a religious group that initially emphasized racial equality, social justice, and community service.
But Jim Jones soon left the church after it was revealed that they refused a mixed-race congregation. Jones decided that he had bigger sights. In 1956, he bought his own church building and organized a large convention featuring revered religious figures to attract more people to what soon would be his own church, and named it Wings of Deliverance, before later renaming it to People's Temple Full Gospel Church. To allow more people to flock to his message, Jones would integrate his extremist beliefs into a form of religion, causing people to commit themselves fully to his ideals, no matter how unusual they were. He began performing healing sessions and clairvoyant revelations and ended up attracting the attention of many spiritualists.
Over time, Jones became increasingly authoritarian and paranoid, isolating his followers from the outside world. In the 1970s, he moved the group to Jonestown, a remote settlement in Guyana, to create what he called a socialist paradise. However, conditions in Jonestown were harsh, and Jones maintained control through fear and psychological manipulation.
Jones would portray Jonestown as a utopia or a socialist paradise, away from all the pressures of the American media. What the members of the group did not know, however, was that Jones had restricted their visas, effectively barring any of them from leaving the country and returning back to their lives in America. By curtailing their visas, everyone became completely reliant on Jones for everything, including news of the outside, emotional and spiritual support, as well as basic everyday needs.
In 1978, after a U.S. congressman visited Jonestown to investigate human rights abuses, Jones ordered his followers to drink cyanide-laced punch in a mass murder-suicide. More than 900 people, including children, died in the tragedy, making it one of the largest cult-related deaths in history.
Jones and other aides were preparing a large tub of grape flavor aid laced with Valium, chloral hydrate, cyanide, and Phenergan, enough to kill an adult male in 30 minutes. After finishing the mixture, Jones called all temple members to join him in the pavilion, the usual place for group meetings. When they arrived, Jones told them all to drink the flavor aid mixture and explained that by drinking this mixture, they would be committing what he called revolutionary suicide. At the same time, Jones started recording the ordeal as it was taking place in a 44-minute video now nicknamed the Death Tape.
Jones's leadership and the Jonestown Massacre remain infamous examples of the dangers of cult dynamics and charismatic manipulation.
The massacre made its way into mainstream media, popularizing the phrase, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," referring to the great flavor aid that was used to kill the citizens of Jonestown.
These 10 cult leaders are a stark reminder that biblical teachings are often twisted for ungodly and even demonic purposes. As Christians, it's not only important to know the truth about what the Bible actually teaches, but also to call out false teachings like the ones we've seen, to protect people from their destructive consequences.
They are people who, in the name of Jesus, pervert the gospel and misrepresent Jesus. And they must be contended with. They must be refuted. They must be exposed. Why? Because if you pervert the gospel and misrepresent Jesus, you undermine salvation.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a deacon, a husband, a father, a software engineer, and an amateur maker of videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help me in my mission to spread biblical truth, just subscribe and watch these videos until the end, which will help the YouTube algorithm recommend these videos to more people. I'm committed to using the skills and gifts God has given me to glorify Him and communicate biblical truth, and I would be so grateful if you would come be a part of what I'm building. You can visit my website at joyfulexile.com to learn more about me and what I'm working on. I hope you're having a blessed day. I will see you in the next video, and remember, this world is not our home.